My name is Jacqueline Wade. I am the campus registrar, and I will be taking you through this morning's proceedings. Although I have from time to time been rightly cautioned by my principal that our public events must avoid certain kinds of religiosity, he will forgive me for saying that the word that this occasion brings to the lips of many here today is Alleluia. For in dedicating this space this morning, we are simultaneously celebrating the remarkable journey of this campus from the embryo at the St. Michael's School to its birth at the Deepwater Harbor and to its maturation at the site where we now sit. Assertive in its place within the UWI family and claiming its rightful patrimony among superior institutions of higher learning. We are celebrating today the triumph of perseverance over occasional adversity, and most of all, the steadfastness of vision of those who never doubted. Fittingly, in our 50th year, we have embarked on a project to ensure that those who guided the progress of our campus are memorialized and proclaimed for posterity. We will initiate that project this morning with the naming of this space in which we now sit as the Leslie Robinson Building. We do this to honor a man who was the first to take over the reins as principal in 1963, when the College of Arts and Science of the University of the West Indies opened its doors at the Deepwater Harbor with a roll of 118 students. Professor Robinson was undeterred by the Spartan provisions of the windswept harbor site and saw its infinite promise reflected in the eyes of those assembled there. He used the music of the waves not as a lullaby, but as a call to action, building with enormous energy on the preparatory planning of the Huggins Group at the St. Michael's School. I refer, of course, to the late Professor Huggins. The minutes of the campus's central committees at that time show the efficiency with which supporting structures and an operational framework were put in place for the new college, and the brevity of those minutes show a Robinson management style that was certainly become much, much more expansive, as I was myself privileged to witness in meetings of the then University Academic Committee, over which he presided later as acting Vice-Chancellor. We wish to honor our stalwarts now because we know how relative reality can be and how new narrative can change old perceptions. We recall, for instance, that Aristotle, notwithstanding being twice married, believed that women had fewer teeth than men, and apart from this being a topic for much speculation on an idle day, this thesis became gospel for another 500 years. In our presentations this morning, we will hear from those who knew Professor Robinson well, and they knew of his many dimensions. The biographical note in your program describes him as a man of many firsts over his 42 years of service to our regional university. The first acting principal of the College of Arts and Science in Barbados from 1963 to 64, first head of the Department of Mathematics at the then University College of the West Indies, the first professor of mathematics at Mona in 1965, the first principal of the Mona campus from 1990 to 91, after the positions of principal and vice-chancellor, were separated. The first warden of Chancellor Hall, 1954 to 55, a capacity in which, I am told, he encountered Mr. Patterson. Professor Robinson also served as the university's pro-vice-chancellor for development and planning between 1972 and 1979, 1979, and acted as vice-chancellor during the period 1986 to 1988. But notwithstanding these many honors and the distinctions, the late Professor Rex Nettleford, in eulogizing him, recognized that Professor Robinson's greatest attributes were his humanity and consummate generosity of spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome to the podium the architect of this morning's proceedings, our distinguished, acclaimed, and most resilient principal, and the legatee of Professor Leslie Robinson, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles.
Each day, Registrar, a new adjective is added to the list. But I feel compelled to say that this is a family gathering. This is a domestic occasion. And therefore, I am asking for the protocol to be observed. And just to recognize that here we have at least 10,000 years of service to UWI gathered in one place. And of course, as an historian, I am fully aware of the gravity of that historical fact, that this really, truly is a gathering of the elders. In fact, it feels this morning like a coronation. There is that feeling that all of the troops, the elders have been gathered, and I am wondering why I am standing here. But you know, there was a time in this country when a Jamaican could walk in, turn the place upside down, and make everyone dizzy with a style that was busy and hurried. And that Jamaican, having completed the mission in record time, then returned to Jamaica, there to recruit another Jamaican who was sent forth to advance that which was established. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 50 years ago. And I am sure that you have already deduced that I am not referring to one P.J. Patterson, the honorable, celebrated son of the Caribbean, though the pattern and the process seems familiar in terms of his style and method. I refer, of course, to Professor Leslie R.B. Robinson and Sir Sidney Martin, both of blessed memory, the first and second principals of the UWI enterprise here in Barbados. And I'm honored to say that we have Prof. Robbie's daughter, Anne, with us this morning. Welcome. We are doubly honored having with us this morning another great Jamaican in the distinguished Honorable P.J. Patterson. The distinction, Prime Minister, does not lie in the fact that you were a great Prime Minister. That is not the distinction. We at KFL, sir, are accustomed to having great Prime Ministers and many Prime Ministers with us. At the moment, we have in our alumni the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister of Belize, the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, the Prime Minister of Grenada, and the Prime Minister of St. Kitts, all graduates of our campus. And I can safely say that there is no university campus in the world that can boast 7 sitting prime ministers at the same time. And in addition to these 7 prime ministers, the gentlemen and the ladies colleagues who are seeking to remove them to become prime ministers are also graduates of the Cape Hill campus. So we are on both sides of the fence, Prime Minister. But the distinction lies in Prime Minister Patterson's record of service to this region, to this university, to this civilization, to this consciousness of being a West Indian, this ontology of being an unrepentant and heroic hero from the grassroots, etc., etc. And all of this is here with him this morning to celebrate with us. Prime Minister, we welcome you. This morning, we honor the inaugural contribution of Prof. R.B, as we fondly knew him, to the development of our academy. Within weeks, we will also celebrate Sir Sidney with the naming of our library in his honor. But this morning, we are returning to our roots, the source of grand things we now hold dearly. Professor R.B was our first principal. Now, I have heard the registrar making reference to Aristotle and theories of gender. And I know that there are many things that can be said about being first. And I do not wish to go any deeper into any theories about being first. But what I can say, by way of humor, is that I was always struck by Oscar Wilde's statements, and I hope that my deputy principal, professor of gender studies, will not take umbrage. But he was always asking the question, why is it that every man wishes to be the first lover of his wife, and every woman wishes that her husband will be her last lover? Well, that is very interesting, isn't it? But I think you can figure that one out. I am aware that for most of you here this morning, this is all very personal indeed. It is embedded, I am sure, in your special memories of this remarkable man of science, whose legacy as a hyper-energetic spirit is remembered for its generosity and its cultured charm. I know of no one who have issued an ill word about Prof. R.B. He was an impossible man to dislike. He was always prepared to listen. He was charming. He was helpful. He would give you directions. In many ways, he was the perfect masculinity with all its internal flaws, the perfect masculinity. And we celebrate him and we remember him. I will tell you the story of my first encounter with him. It was my inaugural year at Mona, 1979. I had gone there largely because of the interventions of Professor Woodford Marshall. And I was given the lowest possible contract a registrar could offer. I was temporary assistant lecturer. And with that status, I was not entitled to any benefits within the University of the West Indies. I was an indentured servant, which was ironic because indentured servitude was my research subject. And so the historians were going off to Puerto Rico for the annual Historians Conference. All of the historians of UWI were all gone, and I was walking through the corridor at Mona, and I bumped into Prof. R.B. And he said to me, "Young Beckles, why are you not flying with your flock?" And I explained to him that I was disenfranchised, dispossessed, and not entitled to any travel benefits, research benefits. I was not entitled to any such procurement, and therefore I was holding the fort. And he said, "Nonsense, young man, nonsense, come with me." And he took me across the Mona campus into the office of the bursar and said, "Prepare an invoice, give this young man 4 days subsistence and a ticket to Puerto Rico." And that was how I made my first trip to the Historians Conference, in Mona. And I have struggled to forget that kind of history. That was the nature of the man. And for me, he was not just, for me at that age, he was not just an angel. Robbie was for me a god, and I really felt very proud knowing him. I am sure that all of these characteristics of this gentleman are responsible for his choice to be the leader of the Barbados Project. The stories of his engagement with Errol Barrow, Cameron Tudor, the technocrats, and the planners in the Ministry of Barbados are legendary. In short time, the facilities at the harbor site were up and running, and UWI began its program in an expansive fashion. This busy little man with a huge mathematical brain had gone to work to bring UWI big time to this island and the sub-region. Knowing of his planning skills and his implementation brilliance, Professor R.B impressed all those with whom he interacted. Within a year, the foundation of the UWI mission was solidly established. And these structures to which I refer are not only the buildings, but also the AHR function, the registerial function, and of course, the bursarial functions. We now celebrate 50 years of this project, the UWI in Barbados at Cape Phil. It has been an enormously successful enterprise. No one today can imagine Barbados without the UWI. Modern Barbados is as much the creation of the UWI as any single factor. The role of this campus in the transformation of this country is arguably more obvious and evident and more compelling than probably the impact of the other campuses on their islands, largely because Cape Phil penetrates deeper into this small space than maybe Mona, St. Augustine, where there are other universities as well. But here, the UWI presence is immediate, it's striking, and it is very deep, which of course, why it is subject to the kinds of conversations that we are having today, and for which my registrar has referred to me as being resilient. If ever there has been a country that sings the UWI praises daily to demonstrate its gratitude to the developmental power of this institution, it is here in Barbados. And so, ladies and gentlemen, on this glorious Monday morning, I welcome you all home. I welcome you all home to celebrate. I welcome you all home again to illustrate the importance of doing the right thing. I welcome you, and I look forward to your engagement with all of the other celebrations we're going to have later in the year, including, of course, the celebration in honor of our second and third principals and naming ceremonies, which we will have in short time. And welcome, and please enjoy the proceedings this morning. Thank you.
Were Professor Robinson alive today, hearing your testament to him and a call to recommitment to the causes that he served so faithfully and with such distinction, he may well have reflected on the words of Matthew, "This is my son, in whom I am well pleased." The chalice has passed, but nary a drop has spilled. The principal's earlier welcome to you, Dr. Robinson Bridgewater, bears repetition. We are honored to have you here with us today. Dr. Robinson Bridgewater is, as you have heard, the daughter of Professor Leslie Robinson and the late Honorable Joyce Lilith Robinson, the first couple to have both earned the Order of Jamaica in their own right. We would call that a power duo. I have often thought that at the back of every trophy presented to a university administrator who has achieved prominence should be inscribed the names of his or her immediate family who would have endured through the years the privations of their family members' university travel, impossible work schedules forced by our innumerable meetings, which our models of consensual decision-making necessitate. But still they rise. During her life as a student, Dr. Bridgewater was the recipient of many awards and prizes, including the gold medal, which is awarded at the end of clinical studies. She completed a degree in medicine in 1984 and later specialized in radiology. She also taught as a lecturer in radiology for almost 12 years at the Mona campus. She is currently a radiology consultant and a founding partner of one of the largest independent radiology practices in Jamaica. Is there some small way, ma'am, in which Cave Hill can claim patrimony for some of this? I welcome you to the podium.
Most Honorable Percival James Patterson, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the Cave Hill campus, Mrs. Jacqueline Wade, Campus Registrar, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'd like to start by thanking Sir Hilary Beckles and the Cave Hill campus for inviting me to attend this wonderful ceremony to honor my father. Secondly, I'd like to congratulate the Cave Hill community on reaching this important milestone of your 50th anniversary as an institution of higher learning. This has been done successfully, expanding to meet the needs of the Caribbean people despite what must have been sometimes very difficult circumstances. Leslie Robinson would have been elated at your achievements, like a proud father. And indeed, he would have had every right to feel like a father, having been there when you were conceived, and then later traveling to be present in the delivery room to play his crucial role in the birth of the babe named the University of the West Indies College of Arts and Science in Barbados, which was later christened the Cave Hill campus. He stayed to nurture you for 1 year, and then he held your hand and guided you for almost 20 years in his role as Pro-Vice Chancellor of Planning and Development of the University of the West Indies. Leslie Robinson was born a teacher. He was all about knowledge, attaining knowledge and sharing it with all those around him. Indeed, friends and dad's sister can confirm for me that even as a child, young Leslie was explaining lessons to his fellow classmates, his friends, and his family, even better than the official teachers. So it's no surprise that on completing his studies at the University of London, Leslie Robinson immediately returned to join the staff of the fledgling University College of London, which had recently started in Jamaica. Dad then gave 40 years of uninterrupted service to this university, which he loved greatly. Leslie Robinson was a true academic and lived for his students. When he was not teaching them in the maths department, he would be advising them on life and career paths, or just teaching them how to enjoy life. Okay? Dad was meticulous, but believed in growth. This would have made him an excellent choice as a person to lead and ensure the safe, solid, and correct start to the Cave Hill campus. Indeed, he must have been very excited. I'd like to pause here to acknowledge and thank the entire group of Pioneer staff members who helped to lay the sturdy foundation on which your Cave Hill campus has been built and continues to be built. We know that no one man could have accomplished this all on his own, but Dad was ably assisted by a bright and enthusiastic team, which included the likes of the late Dr. Richard Alsop, Sir Fred Phillips, and many others. The family has always been proud of Dad's love, commitment, and dedicated service to the University of the West Indies. So you can imagine our great delight and joy on hearing that the university, which he loved so dearly, was now lauding him in one of the greatest ways a university can honor one of its own, by inscribing his name on one of its buildings. This is not only a grand and profound action by the university, but a long-lasting and indelible recognition of the high regard that the Cave Hill campus has for my father. On behalf of the family, I would like to express our deepest gratitude and appreciation to the person or persons who thought to bestow such a great honor on the Honorable Professor Leslie Roy Bruce Robinson. To the university, Cave Hill campus in particular, a hearty thank you for making it the reality it is today. Although Dad is not here, we know that he would have been greatly humbled but ecstatic. Indeed, he would have been the happiest man on earth. And right now, I know he's the happiest spirit in heaven. May Cave Hill continue to be a shining light, and may God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson Bridgewater. I assure you that the honor of naming this building after Professor Robinson is not just his, it is ours. We are honored to be able to do so. I should say something. When I just heard the cock crowing and I heard the principal referring to Aristotle, I was reminded of an anecdote that I heard some time ago. It is said that Aristotle believed that the healthiest children were conceived when the wind was blowing from the north to the south. So one can really empathize with the two Mrs. Aristotles having to go outside at the dead of night to check the position of the cock on the weather vane. So Dr. Robinson Bridgewater, we really do thank you for sharing those personal reminiscences and reflections on your father. As I said, we are so much in debt to your family and to him, a debt that really cannot be fully recompensed. To introduce one of the icons of the regional political landscape and of Caribbean regionalism is in itself an honor. The Most Honorable Percival James Patterson was Prime Minister of Jamaica between 1992 and 2006. He served as head of government for 14 unbroken years before retiring from active politics in March 2006 as the longest-serving Prime Minister in Jamaica's history. At the international level, he has served as chair of the Group of 15 developing countries, including the G15, Group of 77, and China and CARICOM. He has played a lead role in the United Nations, the Commonwealth of Nations, and the Non-Aligned Movement. Jamaica was a member of the UN Security Council during his tenure as Foreign Minister and again as Prime Minister. He was chair of the ACP-EEC Ministerial Conference, where he played a pivotal role in forging an agreement on the basic framework for the original Lomé Convention, which was signed in 1975. He has served as president and spokesman of the ACP Ministerial Council on a number of occasions. At the regional level, he was instrumental in establishing the mechanisms that resulted in the evolution of the Caribbean Free Trade Area into CARICOM. Utilizing his expertise in law and trade matters, he steered the regional body towards the development of a Caribbean jurisprudence through the through the Caribbean Court of Justice, and a borderless regional economy through the CARICOM single market, which came to fruition in 2005 and 2006, respectively. He served as chairman of the CARICOM Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on External Negotiations, from 1993 until 2006. He played an active role in the Caribbean Central American Action, CCAA, a regional body that promotes private sector-led economic development in the Caribbean basin. Since his retirement from active politics, Mr. Patterson has continued to serve when called, as he was by the heads of government of CARICOM, who appointed him as their special representative on Haiti following the disastrous January the 12th, 2010 earthquake. He has established and led an international consultancy firm, Hayes Consults, headquartered in Kingston, Jamaica, which provides a range of technical and advisory services throughout the Caribbean and the developing world. Mr. Patterson is chairman of the International Advisory Board of the Caribbean Research and Policy Center, CRPC, based in Washington, D.C., a think tank dedicated to in-depth research and analyses of the positioning of CARICOM states in issues relating to international trade, development, the economy, society, politics, security, and the environment. I am told by one of my older siblings who was at the Mona campus when Mr. Patterson cut his political wisdom teeth in student politics, as have many of the region's leaders past and present, that while Mr. Patterson was serving as the head of the Student Guild's external relations, his fellow student, Burchell Whiteman, characterized him thus: a nice guy, but he won't make much of a politician. Well, we can file that in the same place that Hannibal filed the statement that the Alps could not be crossed. Mr. Patterson is passionate about the game of cricket and its role as an agency for regional integration. He was an original member of the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Cricket and a member of the Governance Committee on West Indies Cricket, where, along with Sir Alistair McIntyre and Dr. Ian MacDonald, he authored the governance report, which was commissioned by the WICB in 2007. More recently, he was appointed by the West Indies Cricket Board and the Caribbean Premier League, CPL, to chair the Cricket Tournament Committee for that tournament which kept us all out of our beds, whether we were cricket fans or not. We eagerly anticipate his delivery of the Frank Worrell Memorial Lecture tomorrow evening, because we know that in his oratory, he is like Garfield Sobers, as described by C.L.R. James, in command of the rising ball in the drive. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored by the presence of Mr. Patterson, a friend of the late Professor Robinson. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
I remember when the first professor of history at what was then the University College of the West Indies, Sir John Parry, was leaving to return to England. He said at a farewell presentation, there are only two categories of persons that are entitled to reminisce: those who are old or those who are distinguished. Said he then at the age of 41, it is obvious I am not old. And having cleared that out of the way, I will proceed to reminisce. I can't rely on that because it is obvious with the passage of time I have nobody to dispute on my behalf whether or not I am old. But I have to say, to be present here this morning and to see so many familiar faces, notice I omitted the word old, is really for me a very, very special privilege and pleasure. The registrar spoke about the injunction which the principal, the pro-vice chancellor, has placed on religiosity. Maybe he ought to strike a balance and be reminded of that injunction of the scriptures, lay not your hand suddenly upon any man. Because the person in this audience, it seems to be the only person who was caught entirely by surprise that he was expected to make remarks as distinct from being confined to unveiling the plaque was myself. Indeed, I remember the invitation came for another occasion tomorrow, and it had a little sort of footnote. While you're here, would you do this thing for Professor Robinson? And I said, without hesitation, it would be a pleasure. Which leads me to say that yesterday when I was leaving home and trying to explain to a friend of mine why I was so frequently abroad these days, I mentioned that I would be doing the unveiling here. And she asked me, what entitles you to such a privilege? You profess to be familiar with cricket, but what's your association with Professor Leslie Robinson? And I will share with you only 2 of the 4 reasons I gave her, because I think they are sufficient to establish my bona fides. When I went to Calabar High School in 1948, the younger brother of Leslie Robinson had just finished taking the higher school's exam for the 2nd time. The first time he took it, at the age 16, he came first in the island, but he was too young to be entitled to the Jamaica scholarship. So he had to repeat. And he did so by taking 6 points mathematics. He had to teach himself to do that. I don't want you to draw any wrong inference. He taught me mathematics for the first 2 terms in school. And I say this because I mention him in particular, because even if you didn't know about his illustrious brother, who had passed through Calabar and also been a Jamaica scholar, you certainly would hear it time and time again from Roddy Robinson himself. Apart from being a very distinguished scholar, and of course being head boy, Leslie Robinson participated with distinction in every sport in the school. Athletics in the spring, captained the Sunlight team during the summer, and was part of the first Cup team that won it for Calabar. So that was my first reason, the association of school. My second reason, of course, had to do with the matter which brings us here. He was warden of my hall. When we entered the university in 1954, people like Ian Archer had been forced out of Gibb Hall and brought to Chancellor to give it character, they were told. People like Woodville and myself, of course, had the benefit of entering the best hall, unlike Besley Maycock and Sir Keith Hunt, who followed them, that went into the other hall. As I was remarking last evening to Sir Hilary, who met me at the airport, first of all, at that time, there was only one campus, the Mona campus, none other. So the brightest and the best from the Caribbean who elected or were allowed to pursue higher education, that's the only place they could go. Perhaps I should mention that our present Chancellor, Sir George Alleyne, who had won the Barbados Island Scholarship, was among the first to choose going to the University College of the West Indies rather than going to London or any other university abroad. During the time when I was Prime Minister, meeting with the other persons who had also been to UCWI or UWI, and there were about 5 or 6 of us, we used to rib each other about who belonged to which hall, etc. And we didn't realize that some of those who were not fortunate enough to have gone to the University of the West Indies took umbrage, and I think on one occasion referred to us as an incestuous lot. And I said, if that was the badge being ascribed to us, we were proud to wear it. For this reason: reference is often made to my regional commitment. I entered the University College of the West Indies as a Jamaican. I left the University College of the West Indies as an unrepentant regionalist. And the other observation, which I think is very pertinent to make here, is at that time, when we went in, the student body, I think, was a massive 390. And the faculty consisted of about 100 persons spread through the various disciplines. And, of course, the administrative staff, the registrar, Sir Hugh Springer, as he then was. You had to get special permission to live off campus. I think in our time there were probably about 10 no more than that, who could live off. All the people who lectured in the university, the senior people who worked at the university, were resident there. And we were all one family, irrespective of gender, irrespective of the staff position, and even the children of the faculty members. Of course, there were places to which the likes of us couldn't go. In fact, in respect of one of my lecturers, who was Dr. LePage, and the professor of English, who was Professor Cranston, it was said, the LePages speak to the Cranstons, and the Cranstons speak to God. My association with Professor Robinson was obviously not faculty related, because we were then in arts, now called the humanities. He was our warden. And in those days, the wardens were very strict in their observance of the rules. The women, first of all, were in Irving Hall, later Mary Seacole. On one morning at, I think, about 5 o'clock, somebody who belonged to Irving was seen leaving the precincts of Chancellor, to which the then warden, Leslie Robinson, who was walking early in the morning, said, "I hope what you got what you came for and more." But we had a discourse on all aspects of creation. We were extremely involved, perhaps some might say precociously so, in Caribbean affairs. I remember participating in meetings where, even before those who were authorized to do so, we as students were drawing up the Constitution for an independent West Indian Federation. Reference was made to something that Burchell Whiteman wrote. I have two responses to that. In the same magazine, the Pelican, as it was called, he had an article which he wrote, headed, "Why I Will Never Be a Politician." And indeed, there might have been good reason why he didn't think I had a future, because I was not always successful in my campus campaigns when Woodville Marshall was my manager on most of those occasions. It's not his fault, it's mine. I learned from the disappointment of losing to eventually develop the art of winning. Professor Leslie Robinson is one who has made a tremendous impact on the life of all the students who were privileged to come in contact with him in one capacity or another. As was said by his daughter, he was a teacher from birth, a teacher by nature and disposition, and of course, a great teacher from the wealth of his own learning. When the university decided to expand beyond the Mona campus, it had to select one of its brightest and its best to go out into the other parts of the Caribbean and bring them into the fold. And that is how Leslie Robinson was dispatched to Barbados. He came, he made his contribution, and as been said, even when he returned to the headquarters of the university, he continued to contribute meaningfully to the development of the University of the West Indies. There's just one other remark I would wish to make, coming unprepared as I have been for the occasion. It is this. The university was founded to bring the people of the Caribbean together. It is a function which it must regard as sacred, no matter the challenges which face us today. But though we are not all resident or studying in one place, the advent and advances of technology enable us to not only preserve, but to enhance that responsibility of the Caribbean identity. Looking at all the challenges we face, economic, natural disasters, and if I mention politics immediately, I don't want it to be associated with the disasters. Indeed, some say, Sir Hilary, that whatever is happening in the West, in the Caribbean today, because so many of the prime ministers and leaders of the opposition come from the university, it's UWI's fault. But despite everything, we would be much worse off. And indeed, the Caribbean is better off for this regional institution. And we want to recognize today, in a very special way, one of the early pioneers. Please understand, in those days when academic staff was being recruited, for you to have been appointed a lecturer in any department and to be of Caribbean origin would mean that your academic credentials were beyond question. Leslie Robinson was one such. I am very pleased to have this opportunity of being associated with this occasion. And as the motto says, may we continue to be Oriens ex Occidente lux.
I would now wish to invite the whole gathering, led by members of the front row, outside for the unveiling of the plaque. I thank you all for your kind attention. Good morning.